I've been using Saturn II and other multi-band saturators for years now, and honestly, I'm kind of embarrassed that I just now realized this. So if you want to avoid making a mistake that I've been making for longer than I'd like to admit, stick around. But before we start, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, I encourage you to check out our Mixing and Mastering membership. Just for signing up, you receive 10 free mastered songs per month with your own dedicated mastering engineer, unlimited mixing feedback, and access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering educational courses. But more on that at the end of the video. Now, to understand this issue, first, let's cover how and why basic saturators work more or less perfectly. Multiband saturators, or frequency-specific saturators, have been very welcomed additions for mixing and mastering engineers, whether we're talking about exciters or some newer plugins. But for most of us, or at least I could speak for myself, I got pretty used to regular single-band saturators. So much so that when multi-band versions came out, I figured they'd work the same way. But I'm realizing now that they really don't. Now, basic or full-spectrum saturators generate harmonics from the fundamental frequency. Aside from some soft knee compression, this is their primary job. And fortunately, they do it pretty much perfectly. If I feed an A2 note or 110 Hz into a saturator, I know I'm going to get perfect multiples of that fundamental. This is what a harmonic is, a multiple of a fundamental. Now, even when I have a more complex signal, say a bass guitar, and it has some overtones and naturally occurring harmonics that make up the instrument's timbre, I can still count on the saturator to generate harmonics from this fundamental note. If the saturator generates a second-order harmonic, then I know it's creating a note an octave above A2, which would be A3, which is perfect because I know it's going to be in key with my song. Or if it generates a third-order harmonic, I know this will be 3 times the frequency of the fundamental, in this case an E3, which is just about 330 Hz. This may or may not be in key, but at the very least, it's a note and not some random frequency. Here, take a listen. So everything's working as it should. I don't need to think too hard about what the saturator generates, since it'll use the fundamental frequency of the input to generate harmonics. But here's something that I just learned. These harmonics do not carry over. Now let me explain. I always knew saturators use the lowest frequency, highest amplitude aspect of the signal to generate harmonics. This is what a fundamental basically is. It's a high amplitude root note. Now what I didn't know until this week is that the harmonics generated from one band do not affect what's generated in the next band when using a multi-band saturator. For example, if I saturate the low frequency band, we could observe the formation of harmonics. If I create a higher frequency band in the saturator that includes one or more of these harmonics, you'd think that any additional saturation that I introduce would take these harmonics into account, but it doesn't. It doesn't register these added frequencies as part of the signal. Now you're probably thinking, who cares? Why does this even matter? And why is this internet audio nerd talking about this? Well, remember what I said a moment ago. A saturator uses the lowest frequency, highest amplitude aspect of the signal to generate harmonics. This is what the saturator reads or measures as the fundamental and how it determines from which frequencies harmonics will be generated. When I assumed the saturator measured harmonics generated from other bands, I assumed that these in key, or at least tied to the fundamental harmonics, would help it determine how to add new harmonics, which would also be in key or again, at least tied to the fundamental. But since it doesn't, whenever we use a multiband saturator, the harmonics that we create could very well not be harmonics at all. All the saturator can measure is what is the lowest frequency, highest amplitude aspect of the signal. If that frequency is an out-of-key note, or maybe not even a note at all, guess what we're generating? Possibly a whole lot of unmusical nonsense. Now, with something like a single instrument, we could probably get away without knowing this. The natural overtones of the instrument will likely be loud enough to trigger the saturator. But what about a complex mix, or a mix bus? What if the loudest, lowest frequency note the saturator measures is simply not something from which you want to generate harmonics? For example, say I have a song in the key of D major, but I set the saturator's crossover at 523 Hz, or right below C5, which happens to be present in this particular mix. Now C5 isn't in the key of D major, so the harmonics it generates won't be in the right key either. This is a bit of an extreme example that I'm about to show you, but I made it aggressive just to show what I'm talking about. So whenever C5 is prevalent enough, the saturator greatly increases its level, as well as unrelated harmonics. But the problem is even more interesting in the high frequency range where we have a lot more space between notes. Say the mix has a resonance at 4.3 kilohertz, which is a frequency that's in between notes. Then without thinking about it, I set the band to right below this frequency. Again, if this frequency is what gets picked up by the saturator, we have multiples of it being amplified in our mix. So last up, let's talk about a couple of solutions to this problem. First, setting the saturation crossover or band needs to be done thoughtfully. With single band saturators, we could just insert it and know it's going to generate harmonics that relate to the song. With multi-band saturators, we really can't be so sure. Now this means we should set the band to right below a high amplitude in-key note to get the best chance of introducing related harmonics. Another solution, or one to combine with what I just mentioned, is an emphasis-de-emphasis technique. With an EQ before the saturator, we could amplify a note that we want the saturator to pick up on or measure as the fundamental for that band. After it generates the harmonics that we want, we use another EQ with an equal and opposite curve to balance the spectrum back out. So I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least it gave you something to think about. Although using your ears is definitely the best option, for me it always helps to know some of these smaller things to keep me from making mistakes or from being careless. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, I encourage you to check out our mixing and mastering membership. Just for signing up, you receive 10 free mastered songs per month with your own dedicated mastering engineer, unlimited mixing feedback, and access to Sage Audio University mixing and mastering courses, which include start-to-finish walkthrough sessions for various genres and 35 multi-track sessions for hands-on practice. This platform is supported by our thriving community and tight-knit network of audio engineers. And every day, we see and hear great wins in the membership from both new and seasoned engineers noticing a huge improvement in their mixes and masters after joining. Right now, you could join the membership with a 70% lifetime discount, bringing the cost down to just $15 per month. So join today and start creating mixes that sound like professional songs.